You didn't believe she was dead.
I just refused to accept that she was gone. She would never do this to us, but also part of, maybe this is all part of a plan.
As I turned round, the eyelashes and the hair of the princess were moving, caused by the fan, and that just struck me,
After 27 years of silence, the man who drove the most beloved woman in the world has finally spoken. And what he revealed shook everyone. Was it just an accident or something much more? The night that changed history forever. August 31st, 1997. Princess Diana, the most photographed woman in the world, left the Ritz Hotel in Paris with Dodi Al-Fayed, pursued by a frenzy of paparazzi, cameras flashing, engines revving. The world's obsession with Diana reaching a fever pitch. A violent crash, twisted metal, sirens, screams, and then silence. The initial chaos. In the hours that followed, confusion reigned. Early reports said Diana was only injured. There was hope. People prayed. News anchors whispered updates. Crowds gathered outside hospitals, palaces, and newsstands. The world held its breath. And then, the confirmation. Grief without borders. Candles lit every corner of Britain. Bouquets stacked outside Buckingham Palace in walls of color and sorrow. Children cried, grown men wept. No royal death in modern history had ever struck such a personal collective nerve. Because Diana wasn't just royalty, she was real. She touched AIDS patients, embraced landmine victims, comforted the forgotten. She was vulnerable, loving, and fiercely human. That night in Paris ended more than just a life. It ended an era. And behind the headlines, hidden from the flashing lights, was Colin Tebbit, her trusted driver. Not behind the wheel that night, but still, deeply entangled in its aftermath. He wasn't in that car, but he would carry the guilt, the questions, and the duty for the rest of his life. That night changed the monarchy. That night changed journalism. That night changed all of us. I was in bed when the call came. It was late. Just another quiet evening. Colin Tebbit, Princess Diana's longtime driver and trusted staff member, had already turned in for the night. He lay in bed beside his wife, unaware that history was about to shatter into pieces. Then, the phone rang. He didn't think much of it at first. Just another late-night call, perhaps work-related. Nothing unusual in his line of duty. But when his wife picked up, her expression changed instantly. Her voice trembled as she handed him the receiver, telling him that he needs to get up, sit at the end of the bed. Take this. That's when Colin knew. This wasn't just a call. This was the call. On the other end was a colleague from Balmoral. His words were cautious, deliberate. Princess Diana had been involved in an accident. Injured, they said. Colin's heart pounded. He turned on the television, the screen already flashing chaotic live footage from Paris. Paparazzi swarmed. News tickers scrolled with updates that seemed to contradict each other. But nothing could prepare him for what came next. From injury to irreversible loss. Colin clung to the word injured. It was the only piece of hope he had. But within minutes, hope turned into horror. A second call came. This time it was the private secretary. And the truth was devastating. Princess Diana wasn't just injured. She was gone. The woman he had driven countless times. The woman he respected, protected. The woman he spoke with, laughed with, and quietly admired, was now a memory. A surge of emotion and duty. Colin described the moment as paralyzing, a cocktail of disbelief, grief, and helplessness. He sat there, staring at the screen, frozen. The world's most famous woman had died in a tunnel, and he, someone who had spent years ensuring her safety, wasn't there that night. Guilt. It hit hard. But there was no time to dwell. Duty called, and fast. Colin quickly got dressed, his hands trembling. He made his way to Kensington Palace, his mind racing with unanswered questions and unbearable sorrow. From that moment on, he was no longer just a driver. He became one of the key figures responsible for preserving Diana's legacy and protecting her, even in death. The Paris journey and grim task. For most, traveling to Paris is a romantic escape. For Colin Tebbit, it was a journey into the heart of tragedy. Hours after receiving the devastating call confirming Princess Diana's death, Colin was given a task, one no staff member, no human, is ever prepared for. He would travel to Paris to bring her body home. This was not just a logistical mission. This was a sacred responsibility. The woman he had once chauffeured with dignity and discretion now needed him more than ever to protect her from the circus that had already begun to descend upon the French capital. A city cloaked in mourning and mayhem. Colin boarded the flight, accompanied by his wife, fluent in French and a crucial support. The language barrier would have made the task nearly impossible alone. As the plane touched down in Paris, Colin was met with a wave of chaos. Crowds, flashbulbs, international press. The world's eyes were fixated on one hospital, on one woman. Even in death, Diana remained the most watched person alive. But Colin wasn't thinking about the media. He was thinking about her. He was thinking about how to ensure she was treated with the respect and grace she always carried in life, and how to shield her now that she could no longer shield herself. The hospital that became a shrine. He made his way to the Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital, an institution now transformed into a global epicenter of grief. Security was tight. Mourners gathered. The first floor was packed with officials, medical staff, diplomats, and silence. Inside a cold clinical room, Diana lay still. No flashing cameras, no public, just Colin and the weight of his emotions. She looked peaceful, he would later say, but the stillness didn't calm him. He was barely holding it together. Then he noticed something that nearly broke him. Her eyelashes and hair moved gently. Not from life, but from the soft breeze of a nearby fan. It made her look like she was just resting, like she might wake up. That image would stay with Colin forever. Guardian in her final hours. But Colin didn't have the luxury to grieve. Not yet. Outside those hospital windows, the paparazzi were waiting, some perched on rooftops, desperate for a forbidden glimpse. He panicked. There were no curtains in the room. He couldn't let the outside world see her like this. Not now. Not ever. So in a frantic moment of clarity, he did what no one else thought to do. He covered the windows with blankets, sealing them with whatever he could find. Even though it turned the room into a sweltering furnace, he didn't care. Dignity mattered more than comfort. He later fetched fans to cool the room, though the breeze itself would haunt him. A familiar face in a foreign land. In the sea of confusion and foreign procedures, one man stood out. Brigadier Richard Spearman, a military attaché Colin knew from his time with Princess Anne. That moment of familiarity was a lifeline. In the middle of the emotional hurricane, a single anchor reminded Colin he wasn't alone in this sacred task. The weight of the coffin. When it came time to prepare for the transfer, to bring her home, Colin felt the true gravity of his mission. This wasn't just a royal body. This was his princess. This was the woman who laughed in his car, joked during drives, and never once treated him as just staff. Now he had to walk beside her coffin, stand guard, and ensure that not one moment of this final journey would be undignified. No photos, no prying eyes, no scandal. Colin had made it his final vow. Diana would go home in peace. A race against the media. She had barely taken her last breath, and already the vultures were circling. The press, the same relentless swarm that chased her through Paris that night, was now racing to capture her in death. Princess Diana had spent years hunted by paparazzi. Every smile, every tear, every misstep was photographed, analyzed, and sold to the highest bidder. And now, as she lay still in a French hospital, they weren't done. Not even close. The moment that changed everything for Colin. Colin Tebbit had just entered the hospital room where Diana's body lay. He was overwhelmed by emotion, grief, shock, guilt. But even in those first devastating moments, one thought hit him like a lightning bolt: the windows. There were no curtains. And through the hospital glass, he could see figures on a nearby rooftop. Camera lenses. Long ones. Watching. Waiting. They weren't mourners. They weren't medical staff. They were paparazzi, and they were ready to do what they had done all her life: exploit her. Colin knew what they were after. They wanted the final image. One that could sell for millions. One that would haunt history. And he would not let that happen. The desperate response. In a split-second decision, Colin sprang into action. There were no blinds, no privacy screens, no time. So he grabbed blankets, whatever fabric he could find, and pinned them to the windows, creating makeshift curtains. He sealed the gaps, checked from every angle. Anything to block the outside world from seeing her like this. But in doing so, he made the room oppressively hot. The fans were already blowing. The air was heavy. Still, he didn't care, because her privacy meant more than anything. A man alone with his mission. There were no headlines about this. No photos of Colin wrestling with blankets or staring down a rooftop lens. No media praised his quiet heroism. But behind the scenes, while the world mourned, he fought a war of his own. Not with bullets or bombs, but with fabric, with vigilance, with raw determination. Because he understood something most didn't. Even in death, Diana deserved dignity. The press would stop at nothing. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, the media frenzy was intensifying. Reporters shouted questions no one could answer. Photographers jostled for a position. Camera crews beamed live images of a dark hospital window, never knowing that just behind the glass, a man was doing everything he could to preserve the soul of a woman they had helped destroy. One final act of protection. This wasn't part of Colin's job description, but to him it was a sacred duty. He wasn't just a driver anymore. He was her last guardian. In a moment when chaos, headlines, and greed closed in, he became the wall between Diana and the world, and he stood firm. She never got peace in life, but in death, thanks to Colin Tebbit, she had it, if only for a moment. The tunnel and hidden dangers. Beneath the glittering lights of Paris lurks a shadowed stretch of concrete that changed the course of history. The Pont de l'Alma tunnel, just 500 feet long, should have been a fleeting blur on the drive back to safety. Instead, it became a tomb. And now, years later, the man who knew Diana so intimately, who'd driven her countless times, has come forward with startling new insight. A road like no other. Colin Tebbit wasn't in the driver's seat that night, but he knew that tunnel. He'd driven it. He'd studied it. And in his recent interview, he revealed something chilling. The layout of that tunnel, it's deceptive. It plays tricks on you. With its downward slope, sudden curve, and dim lighting, the Pont de l'Alma tunnel is not your average passageway. At night, especially at high speed, it creates an illusion. A dangerous blend of shadows and momentum that can leave even seasoned drivers feeling disoriented. A hidden threat most missed. But that wasn't all. Tebbit described a strange optical effect that even experts hadn't considered. Running parallel to the tunnel are metro train lines. When trains rush past at high speed, the flicker of their motion through the ventilation grills and narrow viewports can make drivers think they're accelerating, even when they're not. Add that to a night filled with pressure, panic, and flashing lights in the rearview mirror, and you've got a recipe for catastrophe. Paparazzi in pursuit, the fuel to the fire. The tunnel may have been dark and misleading, but what chased them in? The paparazzi, on scooters, in cars, armed with cameras, not brakes, desperate to snap the million-dollar shot of Diana and Dodi. Imagine the pressure in that car. Henri Paul behind the wheel, Diana and Dodi in the back, flashbulbs exploding behind them like lightning. And ahead, a tunnel full of shadows, curves, and deadly illusion. Even expert drivers would be rattled. A perfect storm. Colin didn't accuse, he didn't point fingers, but he used one haunting phrase to describe that night. A perfect storm, speed, pressure, paparazzi, a disorienting tunnel, a driver under the influence, and 2 lives hanging in the balance. Add to that the weight of conspiracy theories, secret letters, royal tension, and suddenly the crash doesn't feel accidental. It feels inevitable. The questions that still linger. Operation Paget, the British investigation, would later rule that Henri Paul's intoxication and the pursuit by paparazzi caused the crash. But to this day, even with over $15 million spent and an 832-page report, questions remain. Was the tunnel's layout fully factored into the official reports? Were the security protocols that night adequate? Was Diana's route known to too many? And perhaps the most haunting of all, would Diana still be alive if someone else, maybe even Colin himself, had been behind the wheel? One thing is certain, that tunnel, dark, deceptive, and ordinary to most, holds a place in the world's memory that no monument ever could. It wasn't just a road, it was the end of an era. Inside the emergency room. Behind the sterile white walls of Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris, a desperate fight was unfolding, a battle between life and death. The world outside had erupted into chaos. But inside that emergency room, time stood still, and Princess Diana, the most beloved woman on Earth, was dying. A race against time. It was just past midnight when the ambulance finally arrived. Inside, a critically injured Diana, unconscious, barely clinging to life. The paramedics had worked furiously en route, performing CPR in a moving ambulance, trying to keep her heart beating. But even they could see. Her injuries were catastrophic. Standing by in the ER was Dr. Monsef Daman, a young but highly skilled surgeon on duty that night. He had no idea, when he was paged to the trauma bay, that the patient he'd be trying to save was Princess Diana of Wales. The truth about her injuries. As Diana was wheeled in, the trauma team got to work, intubating her, scanning her injuries, stabilizing her vitals. What they found was devastating. A torn pulmonary vein, one of the most vital and fragile blood vessels near the heart. Massive internal bleeding, and several broken ribs, and trauma to the chest and abdomen. An injury so rare and so severe, it's often described as unsurvivable. Still, they fought. Dr. Daman later recalled opening her chest manually, performing internal heart massage, and attempting every advanced technique available to French emergency medicine. Minutes felt like hours. The surgery team worked for over 2 hours. Outside the ER doors, the tension was unbearable. Security staff, embassy officials, and grief-stricken aides waited in silent dread. No one knew what was happening behind the curtain. Only a small team of doctors and nurses stood between Princess Diana and death. But despite their efforts, her heart had stopped. And this time, it wouldn't start again. At 4 a.m., Diana, Princess of Wales, was declared dead. The burden that never left. Dr. Dahman didn't speak publicly for nearly 24 years, but in 2021, he finally broke his silence. You try to stay focused, but it's different when you're operating on a princess, on Diana. After the declaration of death, he walked away from the table, shaken, silent, haunted. He later said that the emotional weight didn't hit him until he saw her funeral, broadcast live to billions. He had tried to save her. Now he could only mourn her. A final act of compassion. Before leaving the room, Colin Tebbit, who had just arrived at the hospital, was allowed to see her. And what he saw would never leave him. Diana, still and graceful, a fan blowing in the corner, her hair and lashes fluttering slightly, as if she were only sleeping. Colin didn't break down. He couldn't. There was still work to be done. But inside, his heart was shattering. He wasn't just witnessing the end of a life, he was witnessing the end of an icon. Inside that emergency room, a team of professionals gave everything. They weren't saving a royal. They were trying to save a mother, a humanitarian, a woman. But sometimes, no matter how skilled, how advanced, how determined, it isn't enough. And in those sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors, the light of the world went out. Planning a funeral for a princess. Planning a funeral is never easy, but planning a funeral for Diana, Princess of Wales, the most adored woman on the planet, was a task so enormous, so emotionally charged, that even seasoned royal staff were left overwhelmed. For Colin Tebbit, it would become the heaviest responsibility of his life. He wasn't just arranging logistics, he was orchestrating the farewell of a global icon. From driver to guardian of her legacy. In his role as a royal chauffeur and personal aide, Colin was no stranger to protocols or high-pressure situations. But this wasn't just protocol, it was personal. I didn't just work for her, I cared for her, he would later say. And now, he was responsible for helping prepare the princess for her final journey. Every detail mattered. Who would speak? Where would the coffin travel? How would the world say goodbye? The palace's press office, the Lord Chamberlain's office, and government representatives all rushed into action. But Colin was already there, quietly ensuring dignity, grace, and protection were at the center of it all. A ceremony fit for a princess. But was she still one? Behind palace doors, one deeply uncomfortable question lingered. Diana had lost her Royal Highness title after her divorce from Prince Charles. So, would she receive a state funeral, or just a private ceremonial farewell? Some royal aides said no. She was no longer a senior royal, but the public had already spoken. She would always be their princess. Outside Kensington Palace, the floral tributes piled up. Millions of flowers, cards, letters. Streets became rivers of grief. The people demanded a grand goodbye, and the monarchy listened. September 6th, 1997. A nation at a standstill. At 9:08 a.m., the toll of bells echoed from Westminster Abbey. The world stood still. Diana's coffin, draped in the royal standard with white lilies atop, her favorite flower, began its slow procession through London. It was the same route she had once taken to attend royal banquets and charity galas, but now it was a road to farewell. Walking behind her coffin were Prince Charles, Prince William, Prince Harry, Diana's brother Charles Spencer, and Prince Philip. And the world wept. Over 3.2 million people lined the streets. Billions more watched from home, eyes glued to their screens, hearts aching. a song heard around the world. Inside the Abbey, 2,000 guests gathered. World leaders, celebrities, and close friends. But no moment struck the public harder than when Elton John, voice trembling, stepped forward to sing Candle in the Wind, rewritten as Goodbye, England's Rose. The haunting melody, the raw lyrics, the pain in his voice. It pierced through the silence of every home, every heart. The single went on to become the best-selling song of all time, with over 33 million copies sold. But in that moment, it was more than music. It was a goodbye. A royal farewell like no other. From Westminster, the coffin traveled to Althorpe, Diana's childhood home, where she would be laid to rest on a secluded island within the Spencer estate. No final photos, no media, no intrusion, just the trees, the water, and peace. Colin Tebbett, who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes, described it as a moment of deep personal release. We had done everything we could. She was home. The world would never be the same. The planning, the pressure, the politics, all faded in comparison to what truly mattered. Diana had been given a farewell that matched the love the world had for her. A princess not of protocol, but of people. And thanks in part to those like Colin Tebbett, who stayed in the shadows, who guarded her privacy, who stood by her in her final hours, her legacy was preserved. Diana's funeral wasn't just a royal event. It was a global moment of mourning. It was a reckoning with grief, guilt, and the cost of fame. And for those who loved her most, it was the final chapter of a story that ended far too soon. The theories won't die. The crash was fast. The loss was devastating. But the questions, they've never stopped. From the moment Princess Diana's death was confirmed, millions around the world whispered the same word. Why? Official reports called it an accident. Investigations pointed to a drunk driver and reckless paparazzi. But still, something about it didn't sit right. Too many coincidences, or something more. Why was the driver, Henri Paul, allowed to operate a vehicle that night if he was under the influence? Why weren't Diana and Dodi wearing seatbelts? Something Diana was known to insist on. Why did it take so long for Diana to reach the hospital, despite being in one of the most heavily patrolled cities in the world, and perhaps most chilling of all? Why had Diana herself warned that someone was trying to kill her? The note that shocked the world. In 2003, Diana's former butler, Paul Burrell, released a handwritten note allegedly written by Diana in 1993, 4 years before her death. In it, she claimed, "My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure and serious head injury, to make the path clear for him to marry Tiggy. Tiggy Leggy Bork, Charles's former personal assistant. Coincidence or prophecy?" The handwriting matched hers. The fear was real. And the timing? Uncanny. The royal family under suspicion. Dodi Fayed's father, Mohammed Al Fayed, refused to accept the official version of events. He believed the crash was orchestrated by the British establishment, possibly even by M16, to prevent Diana from marrying a Muslim and potentially having a child of mixed race in line to influence the royal family. He was so convinced, he forced a full-scale British investigation, Operation Paget. Operation Paget, the $15 million truth-seeking machine. Led by former Metropolitan Police Commissioner Lord John Stevens, Operation Paget explored every theory, every interview, and every rumor. It ran from 2004 to 2006, produced an 832-page report, cost over $15 million, interviewed 300-plus witnesses, and even reviewed French emergency protocols, embassy communications, and medical records. The final conclusion? Diana died in a tragic accident, caused by Henry Paul's intoxication and the high-speed pursuit by paparazzi. But for many, including Mohammed Al-Fayed, that answer felt incomplete. He called the report a cover-up. He still believes his son and Diana were murdered. Was Diana pregnant? Another theory exploded across tabloids, that Diana was pregnant at the time of the crash. If true, it would lend even more weight to theories that someone wanted to silence her. But forensic pathologist Angela Gallup, who worked on the case, revealed that Diana was not pregnant when she died. It was confirmed via multiple medical tests. Still, the theory remains alive in corners of the internet, royal books, and documentaries. Why the theories persist? Princess Diana wasn't just famous, she was beloved, and mistrustful of the very institution she once represented. She had said in interviews, "There are people in the palace who see me as a threat." So when she died under mysterious circumstances, people remembered. When the monarchy was slow to respond publicly, when protocols were broken, when rumors leaked faster than facts, the ground was laid for decades of suspicion. Accident or assassination? Even today, documentaries still revisit the tunnel. New evidence circulates on social media. Former intelligence officers, chauffeurs, doctors, and royal insiders continue to speak out. And millions of people, fans, skeptics, royal critics, are still asking, was it just a tragic accident? Or was Diana silenced because she knew too much, loved the wrong man, or posed the wrong threat? The theories won't die, because Princess Diana never got to tell her full story. And maybe she still has secrets the world has yet to uncover. After all this time, are we finally getting closer to the truth? Or is there still more to uncover? What do you believe happened that night in Paris? Let us know in the comments below. Your voice matters. And for more untold stories, royal revelations, and hidden truths, subscribe now. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Until next time, keep questioning.